Bose Soundlink Flex. Why is it called Flex? I don't really know. Maybe it's because it's a small, neat little speaker, which means it's quite flexible in what you can do with it. Now, it is quite thin. It's, you know, there's some width to it, but it's very thin. So, form factor is going to come into this. It's quite knockable. It's kind of rubberized on the back, but this front grille is kind of plasticky feeling, which means if I start doing that with it, I would imagine that's going to crack. So, a travel-friendly little speaker. We do have a handy little thing on the end, and you can hook it onto something. Now, it is a little thing. I can just about get my finger in there, and you can't remove that. So that already may be a deal maker or a deal breaker for you. So what's the headlines with the Bose Soundlink Flex? Obviously, we're looking at small and portable. The first issue I had when I went to pair with my phone was I found out very quickly you have to have the app to pair the speaker with your phone. Personally, I don't like it when they tie you to an app for that. Getting some of your details, sending some of your information off to the cloud. Just putting it out there. You need it to connect first time, but you don't need it after that. So why do we need it in the first place? Well, maybe it's because you can change the EQ. Oh, no, you can't change the EQ in the app. In fact, everything you can do in the app with this speaker, you can do without the speaker. If you go into the manual, it will tell you the key pushes that you can use to do the exact same things that you were going to be able to do in the app. For instance, you can turn on and off the voice prompt function. Personally, I find when Bose starts up, I give you a little bit too much information. I just like that little ding. I know I've connected, but I don't want to go, and your phone is connected to below, and the volume and the battery. Yes, would be nice. You could have voice prompt on, voice prompt off, or minimal information voice prompt. You can also pair this with a lot of other, I'm saying a lot of other Bose speakers, because there is a list, if you go on the Bose website, of which speakers this is compatible with. The Bose Soundlink Micro, the Bose Soundlink Color 2, and the Revolve Series 1 and 2, and also with some of their sound bars. And a big grabby, oh, I'm going to get you, because look at this feature that you'll see in the marketing. It's got position IQ. Does that mean it's more intelligent than any other speaker? Well, what it actually means is it knows if you've got it like that, and it knows if you've got it like that, and it knows if you've got it like that. And according to the marketing gumph, it will change its EQ depending on how it is orientated. So that's quite nice if it actually works in the real world. I will say, you know, you can easily play this, and that's quite firm, but it's not. I would have personally liked a chunkier, more of a brick-like form factor. It's kind of some wasted space there for me. I guess you're going to put it in your rucksack. You're going to go travel-friendly. I guess that's more travel-friendly, but we'll get to it soon. It just makes me wonder, a little bit chunkier, like they did with the Mini and the Mini 2, how much more could we got from the speaker? You have got a multi-function button, which allows you pause, play, skip forward, skip backwards. You've got your volume up, volume down. Got your Bluetooth indicator, you got your power button. But what you don't have is, oh, you guessed it, no auxiliary input. And then, oh, moan, groan. I can hear it now, but it is the modern way. They are getting rid of the auxiliaries. And you kind of expect that on more modern speakers. But this is Bluetooth 4.2. 2022, Bluetooth 4.2. I guess if they think they can get away with it, they're going to get away with it. But we do have USB-C charging. It is IPX67, so it is dustproof, waterproof. If you drop it into up to 1 meter of water for up to 30 minutes. The problem is you drop this into, now some speakers you drop in water, you could drop it into 30 meters of water and it will end up 30 meters down, so being splashproof, waterproof to 1 meter of water is not much good. This will float at the top of the sea, the pool, the bath, whatever, but it will float like that. So it's going to be submerged. So as I say, what we would have liked is drivers up and usable. I'm on me Lilo, I'm having a great time, I'm listening to my music. You're not going to be able to do that, but you can drop it safely into water wherever you are, and it will float. It won't go to the bottom, but it will float that way. You think, how much harder would it have been to put some sort of buoyancy in that? They're just orientated, because they've got position IQ. If position IQ was that intelligent, when it realises it's in water, it would do that, wouldn't it? Oh, that's nice, and now we can listen to it. But no, can use this as a speakerphone. Something that would surprise me, and I guess it's because it's Bluetooth 4.2. What does it charge at, Al? I'll tell you what it charges at. 5 volts, 1.5 amps. Now, that's not good. In the days of fast charging, we're looking for 2 amps, 3 amps, and 5 volts. So that's going to take a little bit longer, but what size battery? Well, Bose do not like you knowing the specs. More and more we're seeing this, they won't give the spec. Not that some specs don't really matter. However, what size battery are we going to be charging up? My guess is it's probably 17 watt hours, because that's the size of the battery in the Mini 2. It's going to cost you about £149 in the UK. It's going to cost you about $149. So, my frequency response measurements. Measured face on. See, especially at 40%, very V-shaped and very warm looking, with quite an impressively deep bass, peaking around 75 hertz with a roll-off below 60 hertz, but massive dips in the mids, and then the big peak around 12-13 kilohertz. But as we go up the volume scale, the bass becomes slightly less dominant. It's still there at 60%, but much reduced relatively to the rest of the frequency response compared to 40%. By the time we hit 80%, it's kind of leveling out, but we still get that massive peak in the highs. And of course, bass limiting, as we come to expect 80%, you're just going to get an increase in the mids and the highs. Weirdly, they don't push that 13 kilohertz or so peak that we've got at lower volumes. So, you can listen to it that way, you can listen to it that way, and also, where your head is going to matter. Why do I say that? Because I mean, I like to do recordings at 45 degrees for these type of speakers, because it's kind of a midway between having it there and having it there. But are you going to be standing up when you're listening? Are you going to be sitting down? Is it going to be it's still going to make a big difference to how it sounds. However, keeping my head in the same position, or recording it from the same position, up on axis, on its back, not at 45 degrees, so 90 degrees on axis comparison.
I just wanna dance and my hair starts moving. It makes me feel like I'm losing control. I just wanna dance and my hair keeps moving. It makes me feel like I've never felt before. I just wanna da 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 da. I just wanna dance and my head starts moving. It makes me feel like I'm losing control. I just wanna dance and my head keeps moving. It makes me feel like I've never felt before.
Now, there is a big difference that way, but again, where you actually listen from will make a big difference. However, like for like, there is something going on with so-called position IQ. There is something going on, because where the peaks are on axis and off axis are different. I can see that there is a difference in the tuning. There is something going on. Bass is staying around the same level, but it's rolling off quicker on its back, but it's adding a peak where there wasn't one before when you was on axis. So there is a difference in tuning, but there's a lot more sparkle when you're face on. So I'm going to do my comparisons on axis. And I'm also going to compare it to, finally, you're going to tell us what he's going to compare it to. The JBL Charge 5, the JBL Flip 6. Well, why the Charge? It's a lot bigger, Alan. Well, because let's see, it's not a cheap speaker at 150 quid, and it's around the same price as a JBL Charge 5. In terms of price, they're about the same. I do see people asking about the difference between these two speakers, even though there is a difference in the size. But the Flip 6 also gives actually, the JBL is a bit cheaper for a similar travel type speaker. The other thing is, of course, is they've got tweeters in these speakers. A tweeter to the right, woofer to the left, and the other way round on the JBL Charge 5. And that's the thing. We've only got a woofer. There's just the one woofer, and yet we've got loads of space to the left here. But what they've got a front passive radiator, a rear passive radiator. Well, let's get on with it now. Courage, talks. I've skipped through already, so I have no idea what I'm saying at this point. Around 50% volume. Well, when I say around 50% volumes, the volume scale are not exactly the same. So the Flip 6 at this point is at 60%. These two at 50%.
You were with your friends partying when the alcohol kicked in. Said you wanted me dead, so you showed up at my home all alone with a shovel and a rose. Do you think I'm a joke? Cause people like you always want back what they can at, but I'm past that and you know that, so you should turn back to your rap pack till I'm on trash. Tell all your friends that I'm crazy and drive you mad, that I'm such a stalker, a watcher, a psychopath, and tell them you hate me and dated me just for laughs. So why do you call me and tell me you want me back? You maniac. You maniac. You maniac. You maniac. You just went too far, wrecked your car, called me crying in the dark. Now you're breaking my heart, so I show up at your place right away, wipe the tears off of your face, while you beg me to stay. Well, people like you always want back what they can at, but I'm past that and you know that, so you should turn back to your rap pack till I'm trash. Tell all of your friends that I'm crazy and drive you mad, that I'm such a stalker, a watcher, a psychopath, and tell them you hate me and dated me just for laughs. So why do you call me and tell me you want me back? You maniac. You maniac. You maniac. You maniac. Psychopathic, don't be so dramatic. We had magic, but you made it tragic. Now you're manic, honestly I've had it. Listen to yourself, think you need to get some help. Tell all of your friends that I'm crazy and drive you mad, that I'm such a stalker, a watcher, a psychopath, and tell them you hate me and dated me just for laughs. So why do you call me and tell me you want me back? You maniac. You maniac. You maniac. You maniac.
Around 50% volume, all three speakers. So the Flex compared to the Flip 6, and while you do get a bit more in the deep bass, not that you're going to hear much of that on the Flip 6, the bass on the Flex is much more dominant. If we look at, say, 200 hertz down, that chunk of bass compared to the rest of the frequency response, much more dominant than it is on the Flip 6. We've even got more upper bass, more mid bass on the Flex. It's only in the deepest bass you're going to get a benefit from the Flip 6, but then you're not really going to hear it that much because it's pretty much rolled off. But then in terms of the mids and the highs, much more dominant on the Flip 6. And don't forget, Flip 6, we're pushing +1 in its EQ. Compared to the Charge 5, not the difference I or you may have expected. Upper bass goes to the Soundlink Flex. Mid bass, it's neck and neck, but still just favouring the Flex. It's only when we get into that deeper bass, the Charge 5 takes over. It's the biggest speaker here. It's the only one that can actually reproduce deep bass that you will probably hear in a meaningful way. At 50 hertz, 13 decibels up on the Flex, 12 decibels up on the Flip 6. Well, it wasn't that long ago I was saying, oh, that's quite impressive. Around in the low volumes, the Flip 6, the bass you can get from it, it's got nice, especially nice mid bass. Already, we're at the point where actually it's almost sounding thin against the very, very warm sounding, and it is the Bose signature tuning, and I do like that. I do like the sound of the Bose here. I certainly prefer it to the Flip 6 already, which I was not expecting. Albeit, remember, that is a smaller speaker, although it probably has more power on hand. Obviously, it's got the tweeter. I'm emphasising the tweeter. I'm not over-emphasising it. I'm just saying I'm recording kind of on axis with the tweeter. And it clearly is a lot clearer. by comparison, this will sound a bit veiled, but again, a bit smoother. But that sounds a bit thinner. As someone who likes a warm, not a big thumpy bass, I'm not an upper bass particularly fan. I don't want it to be smothering everything, but I do like the warmth, where it doesn't smother the rest of the track, but it's there. And it's got a nice bass for the rest of the track. That's what you get with the Bose. And in fact, it's going head-to-head with the JBL Charge 5. There's no doubt the JBL Charge 5 has the best balance of all three speakers here. But this is a smaller speaker, and it goes head-to-head with the bass. It will go deeper on the JBL Charge 5, but it's just about getting ahead in terms of the bass, in mid-bass, and certainly in the upper bass over the Charge 5. I think that's a great result. That sounds a lot better than I was expecting. I wasn't expecting it to go head-to-head with JBL Charge 5 so soon after saying, you know, the Flip 6 had done well, and now I'm almost thinking I could chuck that away. I really like the sound of this at low volumes. Just remember, it has a sound signature. If you're an audiophile, so-called audiophile, whatever that is, if you think it should sound as accurate as possible to the original, I don't know why you judge these sort of speakers like that anyway. I think that's a bit silly. However, if you're looking for the most accurate speaker, it isn't. That's certainly the most balanced speaker here, but it's very enjoyable, and given the size, that's probably something that's going to be excellent on a travel. So we move it up a bit. We're going to around 75% volume.
Hoping that you'll answer, cause I'm going insane. It's quite a long time ago, you brought me out of control. Hungry for your love, and like I know what that might be. From Paris to Berlin, in every disco I get in, my heart is humping for love. Humping for love. When I'm thinking of you and all the things we could do, my heart is humping for love. You left me lonely for you. You left me longing for you. You left me lonely for you. You left me longing for you. Teasing was a thing, and now I just can't let it go. Made and you were something no one else needs to know. I guess I'm thinking of you like I would know what to do if and when I found you, but I don't. I've got no clue. From Paris to Berlin, in every disco I get in, my heart is humping for love. Humping for love. When I'm thinking of you and all the things we could do, my heart is humping for love. You left me lonely for you. You left me longing for you. You left me lonely for you. You left me longing for you. You left me lonely for you.
Take down the cardinal. Maybe then they'll see me. Live with a protocol because we are the enemy. This is a battle call. Can you hear me screaming? And down with the underdogs because we are the enemy. Lost our lines when you forgot your script. Thought you'd be fine, but couldn't take a hit. I called the hunch, you couldn't get a grip. Watch your five minds could never coexist. You written on the line, there's a chance you might swipe for your money on your lips. Get yourself out of debt, work of fear from your eyes. Take a breath, through a step when I see you down the line. Say I'm sorry, have we met? If you're never gonna take, then you're never gonna get. Just a pocket and a knife and a taste of regret. Don't be running to the ground, listen to me and forget there's a rule. It's time for a goddamn doing some. Take down the cardinal. Maybe then they'll see me. Live with a protocol because we are the enemy. This is a battle call. Can you hear me screaming? And down with the underdogs because we are the enemy. I like to see the victory. This is do you think we should?
We were talking about balance before, and clearly even less balance now around these volumes. We are pushing it a bit now, quite a bit for the Bose, and the sound does change a lot as you got the volume scale. Hell of a lot warmer at the lower volumes, and obviously the bass relative to the rest of the track is reducing. and it's becoming a bit more ordinary now. However, it's still holding on to a decent dollop of bass. It's still a warm sounding speaker, but the highs are getting pushed. We've only got the woofer, whereas they both have tweeters, and you can really hear the difference. For me, the Flip 6 now way too brittle and thin sounding by comparison with the Flex. As I said, it wasn't that long ago. I thought that was a pretty decent listen. Listening to the Flex now, obviously that's going to be always a lot clearer, but it's too shrill. There's just too much there. I don't know if they're just trying to showcase the tweeter, but it's just too much. And as I said many times before, having a separate tweeter is no means the end of the story. How well it's implemented and how nice that tweeter is and the crossover, etc., etc. We've still got the warm sound, but it is disjointed now. It's not the great. I think it's a nice listen. I think it's doing well, and I'd rather listen to that than the Flip 6. But by comparison to the Charge 5, which has now still got a balance, this is a bit disjointed, and this is the better listen. If I had both speakers on hand, I would listen to the JBL Charge 5 at these volumes because it's keeping it together more. So what happens when we go in a maximum volume? Can it somehow create a miracle like the parting of the waves and be the loudest speaker on this table? Charge 5, the biggest speaker here, as you would hope, it's the loudest by just under 3 decibels over the Flex, but only a tad more than the Flip 6 because the Flip 6 highs are so dominant, and that's where the loudness is coming from. But in terms of bass, we're 3 decibels up on the Charge 5 compared to the Flip 6, and a decibel and a half up on the Flex, which, yes, does have more bass at maximum volume than the Flip 6. It's got more upper bass, it's got more mid bass. The Flip 6 only has an advantage in deep bass that you're simply not going to hear it so rolled off anyway. It has those piercing highs, over 3 decibels stronger. That's like doubling the power on the Flip 6 in terms of the highs compared to the Soundlink Flex. Overlaying all 3 speakers, 100% volume, it makes it a lot easier to spot what is going on. We look at the Flip 6 in white, it's actually got the least bass of all 3 speakers. But then look at its peak, 4 kilohertz. It's got the biggest peak in the highs. And that comes together to mean a very shrieky, hard to listen sound. The Soundlink Flex holds on to more bass, holds on to a lot more upper bass, a bit smoother, albeit rolled off, because it's a bit more balanced. Its mids and highs are the weakest of all 3 speakers. But a bit more balanced than the Flip 6. You can see Charge 5, by far the biggest bass of the speakers. The biggest peak, it goes the deepest. And actually, its mids are a bit more dominant. Again, giving it a bit more of a balanced sound overall. So the Charge 5 is the loudest speaker here. As you'd expect, it's the biggest speaker, it's got the biggest drivers, and it's got the most power on hand. Hey-ho, it goes louder. But in terms of LUFS, which is a measurement of perceived loudness, there's hardly anything in it between Charge 5 and the Flip 6 now. Why is it different to when you did it before, Al? Because I'm now focusing more on the tweeters. So you really hear what the tweeter can do, which means because it's more shrill now, they're trying to push that tweeter more on the Flip 6. In terms of perceived loudness, because it's all highs now, whereas that's holding on to bass, it sounds like it's louder in LUFS because it's perceived loudness. But if I go back to the old world when we worked with RMS, we are a decibel up on the Charge 5. That's the difference between perceived loudness and simply an average of the RMS. But the Bose, yes, it's not the greatest listen, but do you know what? I've heard a lot worse when pushed to maximum. It's almost quite a clean sound. And while it's holding on to its bass, it's still a warm sound. And in fact, it's doing the weird thing. It's holding on to bass rather than push the mids and the highs. That's for me, I'm happy to see that happen. Hold on to as much of that warmth as you can. That's the Bose way. I personally like that sound signature. However, as a maximum volume listen, it is hard edged. It is a bit thin. But relative to other speakers like this, what they're doing, it's still warmer sounding, holding on to more of its bass. And the Flip 6, just too shrill, just too thin. The bass is all gone. I mean, it's got more highs than the other two, and it's got less bass, and that is the story here. So the story is China. This is made in Thailand. Woo! It makes a nice change, doesn't it? Around £160, $160, around £120, $120, and around £149, $149. You can connect two different devices to all of these speakers. We don't know the battery, as I said. I think my best guess is probably the same as the Soundlink Mini 2, which was 17 watt hours. We've got 17.3 watt hours, so, you know, for that size of a speaker, I guess that's what you're probably talking about. 27 watt hours on the bigger speaker. They are all SBC codecs. We've got used to that now. Bluetooth 5.1, Bluetooth 5.1, Bluetooth 4.2. All do stereo pairing. All have USB-C connections. None of them have an auxiliary input. You can use you can use the Charge 5 as a power bank. Feature we used to get all speakers. But you can only use this one as a power bank, and these two you can't. Still not quite sure how many people actually use your speaker to charge your phone, but there you go. We think 40 watts, 30 watts, around 20 watts. My version, I keep saying, they get all different versions of different materials. My version of the Flip 6 will not float, which makes this waterproof, the IPX7, a bit silly, but however, this one does not float. Obviously, it's going to be splash proof, and that means if you drop it in more than 1 meter of water, you're pretty much going to be knackered anyway. The JBL Charge 5 will float, and it will float with the drivers up. That's brilliant. Flex floats, but not with the drivers up. All of them are actually dust proof. We've got a separate tweeter. We just got the one. We got the one woofer, passive. And in terms of this got me. In terms of latency, I hear people talking about this speaker's got zero latency. Of course, zero latency does not exist. I guess what they mean is noticeable lip sync issues. 50 milliseconds I measured in terms of streaming YouTube, the difference between the mouth moving and when you get the sound of the mouth moving. 80 milliseconds for me is where the cutoff point between where you don't notice it and then you do and it's bothering. 50 milliseconds is as good as it gets, so that's excellent. Unfortunately, 116 milliseconds, 125 milliseconds does not cut it. They've all got an app, and you probably guessed it by now. I haven't updated to the latest firmware for the JBL Charge 5, where if you do that, you'll get EQ. I have updated the Flip 6, and that's why I've used a little bit of EQ on the Flip 6. In future videos, I will have hopefully updated my Charge 5. So, wrapping up the video, finally, the Bose Soundlink Flex, a speaker I really like. Now it's going to be one of the top recommendations, I would say, for someone looking for a small travel speaker. Bear in mind, you're going to have to like a warm sound signature. It's not going to be the clearest as you've got the volume scale, but it's still going to sound pretty decent. As often is the case, it's going to depend on the music you listen to and your own particular taste. So, I hope you got something out of this particular video. I hope to see you in another video. And if I don't see you in another video, I hope you have a brilliant year. Thanks for watching.
I ain't about that life. I ain't about that life. Ain't no project wife, got my logic right, cause I'm not your type. I ain't about that life. I ain't about that life. Sorry, ma, I ain't get it right. I'ma just live my life. I ain't about that. I ain't about that life.